What's up? This is Erik Stafford again with the Kansas City Tour Company. Just doing a continuation from my earlier video I did down on 18th and Vine. In the spirit of 18th and Vine, I want to read to you an article that was published in the Kansas City Call newspaper about a month ago about the last 100 years of jazz here in Kansas City. Please go to our website at www.kansascitytourcompany.com to confirm your tour for any of our regularly scheduled historic tours. We do Bebop and Beyond 18th and Vine Walking Tour. We also do Streetcar KC, a River City Civil Rights Tour, and Streetcar KC, a River City Mafia Tour, and our new tour is Penn School is in Westport Walking Tour. Again, that's www.kansascitytourcompany.com. Again, I'll be reading from an article that was published by me in the Kansas City Call newspaper. The Kansas City Call was celebrating over 100 years of publication beginning in 1919. Its founder, C.A. Franklin, was very instrumental in the organizing of the Pullman Porters here in Kansas City with the help of A. Philip Randolph, and that was the beginning of the civil rights movement nationally. That was around 1925 when the Pullman Porters were organized here in Kansas City out of Union Station. So I'll begin. Inherently gifted with song, melody, rhythm, and talent, Kansas City's cultural identity comes from black folk. When the dust settled from the Civil War, freedmen came from the South and surrounding towns. As slaves, they and their ancestors sent messages to each other by the way of the drum. The master class grew leery and outlawed the communication. Nonetheless, they sang work songs in the field to help them get over spirituals such as Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, Ezekiel Saw the Wheel, and Go Down Moses. They played the banjo and danced when they were summoned to the masters to entertain. Cakewalking, black slaves mimicking their white masters' mores and customs was made the rage by the whites who were entertained. Minstrel shows captivated the attention of the majority, and out of which those stereotypes that continue to haunt black life derived. Born in Atchison, Kansas in 1901, Jesse Stone started performing as early as 5 years old in minstrel shows. Jesse Stone from Atchison, Kansas. What's up, E Triplet, Southeast Night in the house? What's happening? Cognizant of themselves and their environment, George Walker, along with his wife, Ada Overton Walker, and Burt Williams, formed a black-owned production company which produced the first African-American play featured on Broadway. Ada was also known as the Queen of the Cakewalk. Williams and Walker billed themselves as two real coons, thus becoming one of the most successful vaudeville stage acts at the turn of the century, black or white. R.G. Jackson created Webster University Music Department. He organized the Jackson Jubilee Singers, who toured the country singing Negro spirituals to raise money for a black college founded in the Quindaro Township of Wyandotte County, Kansas. The school's music department was catalytic in laying the foundation of Kansas City's jazz scene and style. Ragtime before bebop planted roots in the heart of America. William Blind Boone was a pioneering ragtime composer. Boone was one of the first blacks recorded via piano rolls, which were holes that were actually punched in a roll to document sound. James Scott published March and Two-Step in 1903. Scott Joplin of Sedalia, Missouri, widely known for his publication Maple Leaf Rag, also published a ragtime opera called Trementia, which was rediscovered in 1970. The composition was directed toward black literacy during the era of Reconstruction. Jazz originated in New Orleans but developed in Kansas City. The original jazz district begins on 12th Street. After receiving the rights to the Hannibal Bridge, the city grew to become the second largest livestock exchange in the world, second only to Chicago. And Chicago was the largest livestock exchange in the world. Immigrants came because there was work here in the packing houses, the grain and feed factories, and along the railroads. Jim Pendergast, a gambler from St. Joseph, Missouri, opened a bar around the corner from the first Union Station on 12th Street, right below the Bluffs. After work, people went to the establishments like Pendergast to drink and gamble. There were crap houses, bars, and brothels throughout the West Bottoms and all along 12th Street. Emerging as a political machine, Pendergast established a red light district on 12th Street, which served to quarantine vice away from the white Protestant demographic. Uday Bowman composed 12th Street Rag in 1917. The piece was reproduced by Benny Moulton, Louis Armstrong, and Duke Ellington in 1917. The federal government passed the Volstead Acts, aka Prohibition, outlawing the manufacturing and distribution of liquor. Although the law was enforced at the federal level, at the municipal level, the law was literally ignored. Underground tunnels were built throughout downtown Kansas City to distribute liquor throughout the restaurants, hotels, and concert halls. In 1915, N. Clark Smith left Tuskegee Institute in Alabama to head the military department at Western University. A year later, he joined the music department of Lincoln High School in Kansas City, Missouri, then located at 1835 Tracy. His students, Walter Page and Thurman Hayes and Harlan Leonard, would lay the foundation for what would become Kansas City's jazz scene. Black musicians weren't allowed to join the American Federation of Musicians. In 1917, the Musicians Protective Union 627 was established. The union served as a clearinghouse for black musicians in Kansas City. Musicians formed traveling territorial bands. Walter Page formed the Blue Devils, which was made up of Count Basie, Joe Jones, and Orrin Hot Lips Page. Clyde Williams and Lester Young also. The group was raided by the legendary Benny Moulton. Thurman Hayes recorded Foxtrot with Benny Moulton in 1923. Jesse Stone played the piano and wrote arrangements for Thurman Hayes' Rockets, which featured Harlan Leonard and Samuel Baby Lovett. Tad Dameron wrote and arranged music for Harlan Leonard's Rockets. Winston Holmes recorded Hattie McDaniel in 1925. She was the first African-American woman to win an Oscars for her performance, Gone with the Wind, in 1925. She was born in Wichita, Kansas in 1894. George E. Lee was a band leader who featured his sister Julia. In 1927, his band featured Jesse Stone. The group also recorded on Holmes' label, Merritt Records. Basale Hall hosted legendary band battles between George E. Lee and Benny Moulton. When Benny Moulton died at Phyllis Whitley Hospital in 1934, Count Basie inherited his band, which became known as the Bears of Rhythm. Kansas City style was made famous by Count Basie's band, which featured Lester Young. He and another saxophonist from Kansas City named Ben Webster recorded with Billie Holiday. In Harry Belafonte's autobiography, he credits Lester Young for inventing the word cool. Young also called Billie Holiday her nickname Lady Day, while she called him Prez. In 1935, Andy Kirk and the 12 Clouds of Joy were brought into Kansas City for an extended stay at the Playmore Ballroom to give Cab Calloway some competition, who had a long-standing gig around the corner at the El Torreon. Andy Kirk featured Mary Lou Williams on piano. She became known as the First Lady of Jazz. Herman Wilder was another well-respected saxophonist who played with keyboardist Lionel Hampton, along with Ben Kennard, who published Red Top in 1947. Kennard played with Hampton for 7 years. Black musicians were booked to play for white audiences at the Municipal Auditorium in Fairyland Park. However, they were not allowed to sit in the audience. They could either sit with the band or behind the band. From these segregated practices in Kansas City, a tradition developed at the Mutual Musicians Foundation that still stands today. Jam sessions came about after black performers were released from their white gigs. Kansas City was already swinging by the time Charlie Parker was pulled from the boom by Dr. Solomon H. Thompson in Kansas City, Kansas, on Freeman Avenue in 1920. What's up, George Griswold? Raytown South in the house. Parker grew up wanting to be a musician. He received his first saxophone in the 4th grade at Penn Elementary School. He dropped out of Lincoln High School at the age of 15 to become a musician. At 17, he graced the stage of the Reno Club. Drummer Joe Jones made mention of the different levels of band play. One had to graduate and was often told they could sit in and play with certain people because they weren't in the same vibe. Fox's Tavern on any given night could feature Duke Ellington, Dorothy Dandridge, Cab Calloway, and Bilbo Jangles Robinson. Charlie Parker, no different than anyone else, had a symbol thrown out on him by Joe Jones when he debuted at the Reno, a signal for him to exit the stage. Around this time, Count Basie and the Barons of Rhythm went on to Chicago to play at the Grand Terrace Ballroom, which at one point in time was owned by Al Capone, the notorious gangster. Before leaving Kansas City, they opened up for Duke Ellington at the Purcell Hall. Meanwhile, Charlie Parker secured a gig in the Ozarks where he woodshedded to hone his skills. He came back to Kansas City new and improved, looking to further his study. He set his sights on Chicago and New York. Buster Smith, who also played saxophone in Basie's band at the Reno Club on 12th Street, acted as a mentor for Parker during their stay together in New York. Upon hearing the news of his father's death, Parker returned to Kansas City. He joined the Jay McShann Band and returned to New York, where he left an everlasting mark. Miles Davis dropped out of the Juilliard School of Music for tutelage under Charlie Parker. Bebop, a derivation of jazz, was pioneered by Parker. The style changed the way people perceived music. During the era of swing, people danced to jazz. Bebop made people listen. Tad Demeron was a bridge between swing and bop. He wrote Hot House, which featured Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Bud Powell, and Miles Davis, and Charles Mingus. And he also wrote music for a trumpeter who died too soon named Clifford Brown. That's who we're listening to right now. This is Erik Stafford with the Kansas City Tour Company, reading to you an article that I wrote from the Kansas City Call newspaper, 100 Years of Jazz. What's up, Mr. Baldwin? When Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were organizing boycotts, that's what they were listening to, bebop. Bebop and Beyond 18th and Vine Walking Tour. Go there to www.Kansas City Tour Company to sign up for my tour, Bebop and Beyond 18th and Vine Walking Tour. I also do Streetcar KC, a River City Mafia Tour, and a Streetcar KC, a River City Civil Rights Tour, and a new tour we have, Penn School was in Westport Walking Tour. Big Joe Turner had already done his part to put Kansas City on the map with a song called Piney Brown's Blues. In 1954, he released Shake, Rattle, and Roll, written by Jesse Stone through his pen name, Charles Calhoun. Bill Haley and the Comets and Elvis Presley both reproduced the legendary hit afterwards. That's right, Big Joe Turner from Kansas City. He was the first person to sing Shake, Rattle, and Roll before Bill Haley and the Comets and Elvis Presley. It was written by a black man by the name of Jesse Stone, whose pen name was Charles Calhoun, and Jesse Stone was from Atchison, Kansas. Throughout the Civil Rights era and beyond, there were those that continued to become elders, living legends. Clyde Fiddler Williams of Muskogee, Oklahoma, played with Andy Kirk. Jay McShann and Count Basie, he played with them also. Clyde Fiddler Williams lived to be 96 years old. Trumpeter Step Buddy Anderson and Jay McShann and Count Basie. Count Basie was from Red Bank, New Jersey. Trumpeter Step Buddy Anderson, who introduced Charlie Parker to Dizzy Gillespie, he was from Muskogee, Oklahoma. Myra Taylor was an actor and vocalist who featured with Harlan Leonard and U.B. Blake. At an early age, growing up in Kansas City, she would walk into the Reno Club to perform as a dancer. The Orchid Room and the Nightingale Tower continued to bring in national acts such as vocalist Earl Grant and Dinah Washington. Earl Gardner, who wrote Misty in 1954, was another regular on 12th Street. One should hear Sarah Vaughan's rendition of Misty. It's available on YouTube. Professor Willie Rice wrote music for R&B legend James Brown. He was also a driving force in keeping the jazz alive, teaching a slew of young musicians who came through the foundation. There was guitarist Sonny Kenner, who regularly played at the Levee in Westport until he passed in 2001. He, along with Lucky Wesley, Eddie Saunders, Luke Hamza, and Frank Smith, formed long-standing groups like the Four Aces and the Stamps. They performed regularly throughout Kansas City. There was also a good friend of mine by the name of Donald Cox. I got the chance to know him personally. He featured at the Solar Lounge in 1968, and then there was a bassist, Daoud Williams, who I also got to meet before he passed away. They continued to develop the Kansas City jazz scene. Today, we have pianist James Hathaway and vocalist Denise Walcott. They give credit to Professor Willie Rice for continuing the Kansas City jazz legacy. Also, Donald Cox and Daoud Williams as well for preparing them to deal with today's live music scene that's going on today. They've been active members in the foundation for over 40 years. So the Mutual Musicians Foundation, they just celebrated 100 years, actually in 2017. But them and the Liberty Memorial are listed on a special historic registrar that's recognized nationally. They're the only two historic locations in Kansas City listed on this registration. And that's the Liberty Memorial and the Mutual Musicians Foundation, where Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie met for the first time. So in order to keep the legacy alive, saxophonist Eddie Baker started the Charlie Parker Memorial Foundation and gave birth to the International Hall of Fame of Jazz, which predated the American Jazz Museum. Okay, so Charlie Parker was going to be he would have turned 100 years old this year, August 29th, 2020. So had it not been for COVID, over thousands of people would have came to Kansas City to celebrate Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker is actually the fourth person inducted into the Music Hall of Fame. Also in 1972, Sumner High School band directed by Leon Brady won an international jazz festival competition in Paris, France in 1972. So Kansas City's jazz scene is still alive and thriving today. We have jazz rapper artist James McGee and an innovative saxophonist on the horizon by the name of Ernest Melton, trumpeter Herman Meharry. He's been celebrated internationally, as well as saxophonist Logan Richardson and Chris Nickens, I'm sorry. And so there are a few others that I'm remiss in not naming, but the list goes on and on. But Kansas City's live music scene is alive and well here in Kansas City. But Bebop and Beyond 18th and Vine Walking Tour every Saturday. Go to our website, www.kansascitytourcompany.com, to confirm your tour. Also, Streetcar KC, a River City Civil Rights Tour, and Streetcar KC, a River City Mafia Tour. And Penn School was in Westport, a walking tour.